Ecclesiastes chapter 11. We are coming to the end of our journey in a book that helps us to live in the real world. We are a people who are called to be genuine and authentic as people. But we are also called to be realistic in the world that we have been placed into. We do not live in Eden, nor are we yet living in the fullness of the new creation. We are living in between. Bono of U2 fame has written, quote, "Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books. It's a book about a character who wants to find out why he's alive, why he was created. He tries knowledge, he tries wealth, he tries experience. He tries everything. And then you hurry to the end of the book to find out why. And it says, remember your Creator. In a way, it's such a letdown. And yet, oh no. It isn't," end quote. Getting to know our Creator before we grow old and die is the most important thing we can ever do. And between Eden and eternity, we will live a life between youth and old age. It's easy to think about what it means when we are young. The vibrancy of youth and the energy of life. But as we grow old, we are hoping that we will grow old well. Grace and graciousness. And so, this part of Ecclesiastes is bookended by a call to youth and a call in the midst of growing old. Kidner has written, quote, "Candid as ever, these verses in verses 7 to 10 match the delight of existence with the seriousness of it. Each joy here is confronted by its opposite or its complement. There is no softening of the colors on either side. The bliss of being alive is captured in the lovely sentence which opens with the saying, 'Light is sweet.'" Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 7, "Life is sweet, it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun." So, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many, and all that comes to vanity. "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart, in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you to judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are also vanity." Solomon addresses those who are young, so he is speaking to the youth. This includes more than we might for our young people and young adults. Listen carefully to what the preacher says. First, he speaks to the up and downs of life in verses 7 and 8. The opening couplet reminds us that there is the light and the dark of life. And make no mistake, there is an authentically godly enjoyment of life. It is sad when all some Christians see is the darkness. The light and the sun are sweet to the senses. We don't even need to spiritualize the experience. Even Solomon has pointed us as Christian realists to really enjoy what God has given us, even in the dark day, even in these days under the sun. So enjoy while you can. There will be enough dark days as it is. And live life to the fullest. If you have a long life, be happy that God has been pleased to grant it. Never take the pleasures and joys of this world for granted. Remember that there have been and will be even more dark and difficult days. This is simply the way of life. We may not deny the light or the dark days, but we must not only see the light or those dark days. It's foolish and futile to do otherwise. If this sounds dark to you, you need to get out into the light a little more. And then Solomon points us to the freedom and accountability in life. Verse 9. Young people, he says, be glad for the days of your youth. These are good days. These are days you will not have again. But you must keep something in mind. The warning here is not meant as a dire threat to kill your joy. This warning is meant to keep your joy in bounds. As one writer says, joy was created to dance not alone, but with goodness. Joy untempered by a sense of the seriousness of this time under the sun simply becomes triviality. And joy uncontained by accountability will become vice. So you are allowed to dance, if you will. You are allowed to leap and quiver with joy, but not to dance in a way that abandons all restraint. Your present time is not all there is. There is coming accountability. That future answering to God then gives realness, genuineness, authenticity to our present joys. Well, but too many are enjoying life in order to avoid thinking about the future, whatever it may bring, and particularly our accountability to God. The very noise of their happiness is drowning out and covering over thoughts of facing God. You will face God one day. Doesn't matter if you believe that or not. You will. This is the truth. And the question is, will you face Him on your own or with Christ as your advocate? The realities of youth also are pointed to in the spiritual and physical pains in life, verse 10. Now, commentators are all over the map with verse 10. First phrase is easy. What does it mean to put away pain from your body? And the couplet is intended, as most Hebrew language like this, intended to be read together. The second is expanding on the first. They follow on the lines before them. If this is so, then is not this the meaning? Stop being agitated about all the things in life. It's easy to be vexed about many things. We sweat the small things and worry about the inconsequential. We are agitated over things that are distant from us, over which we have little to no control. These worries and vexation cause many aches and pains in the body. There's a connection between the two. What is going on in your heart affects your body. And what is going on in your body tempts your heart. So there's an important lesson for youth to learn. There are so many high-powered, high-pressured things that disturb and make young people anxious. Social media and the immediacy of verbal affirmation or destruction with a driving focus on craving approval and acceptance. Young people are often nervous and anxious and vexed over many things. Put them away. Put away the cravings in your heart that cause you to be anxious about so many stupid, trivial, small things. Put away getting your identity and your worth from other people. Rejoice much in this time of being young. Stop worrying about the wrong things. But do understand, at the end of the day, you will be accountable do understand that you are not and cannot be eternally young. One commentator wrote, quote, "Rejoice responsibly, enjoy life's pleasures, but not in sinful ways. Celebrate the gift of your youth, but at the same time, follow God's command to flee youthful passion, to pursue righteousness, faith, and love, and peace, along with all of those who call on the Lord from a pure heart." 2 Timothy 2:22, end quote. And so we have the realities of youth. Then we have the realities of aging. Now, we could go all day maybe without coming to these few verses. And having spread 6 yards of mulch yesterday, I'm feeling the reality of all this. Verses 1 to 7 are where all of us are headed. No matter who we are all going to get older. If God does grant us long years in this fallen world, we will become frailer and weaker. Part of being a Christian realist is recognize the inevitable march of time. We are, after all, living between Eden and eternity. And this is why we should enjoy relishing and remembering our youth. There is something good and healthy about remembering our lives. We are designed by God to do it, and yes, it is possible to take it to unhelpful and morbid direction. But to sit and share and savor what we remember about the goodness and grace of God in our younger days is an ever so sweet thing. But you know, sunsets can be beautiful. But all the ones I've ever seen always come before the darkness. And so Solomon calls on us to verse 1, chapter 12. "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent and the grinders cease because they are few. And those who look through the windows are dimmed and the doors on the street are shut. When the sound of the grinding is low and one rises up at the sound of a bird, then all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. And the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, desire fails. Because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners follow, the proper word, follow about in the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. And the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to the God who gave it. Keep your Creator in mind. Verse 1, a keen observer of people once wrote, inside every old person is a young person wondering what happened. To you young people, to you young adults, Solomon speaks with consummate wisdom. There is something much, much more important to remember and to reflect on now. Yes, there is the privilege of rejoicing in the joys of your youth and in the life you have, and the responsibility to be mindful of your accountability to God. But in the days of your youth, before fallenness and darkness of life hardens you, remember your Creator. Now, the word remember is not simply meant to recall, to reflect. The word means to remember so as to give attention to. It's basically a call to pay attention to God through what you have been taught and what you do know. And this call comes not only to those who have been taught about God, but also to those who only know of the wrath of God revealed in them to all creatures since creation. Romans chapter 1. Why is this so? Because it is the Creator who is to be given attention to. All humanity, all creation is accountable to the God who is our Creator. The denial of being created by God is ultimately a denial of accountability to the one that made all things. This is a delusion. God exists, whether you believe in Him or not. He made you, and whether you acknowledge this or not, the fact that you deny itself is a monstrous rebellion against the one who made you and who created you. It is a rebellion against the one who not only gave you being, but knit your soul and body in the womb, but who also sustains you every moment. Even in this moment, your next breath comes because of your Creator. And the joy of life and the energy of youth, give wholehearted attention to the one who is your Creator. And do so now. Do so now before the dark days come. The dark days here may be referring to the days when you are hardened against God, or it may be the dark days when God withdraws His grace and leaves you to your own devices. Or it may be the dark days when your reason leaves you and faith is not possible. Keep your troubles in mind. Verses 2 to 5a. Remember your Creator while you can, for growing old is not an easy thing. There are many trials and troubles that are attended to it. These troubles and trials may draw you to remember, to consider the Lord, but too often they are met with hardening hearts and disregarding minds. Here is a stunning picture of an elderly person. I don't know that it's helpful to try to say what each thing is, though you probably could. That might be a little bit like dissecting a butterfly or dismantling an eagle. But the image is arresting. We can see the elderly person, body bent, legs trembling, teeth missing, and eyes cloudy with cataracts. They are early to bed and yet wake often. They are careful as they walk, lest they are knocked down. Their hair is white, their gait is slow, their energy weak. This lovely imagery hides and highlights the painful changes that come with growing older. Oh, we hope to do well. We hope to be ready. But then there come the surprising and disconcerting troubles and weaknesses, trifocals. Sleeping often, waking often. My friend Mark Furman, I would ask him while we were traveling, Mark, how'd you sleep? He would say, often. And new pains, places we never thought about before. So keep your troubles in mind because they are coming, and keep your death in mind, verses 5b through 7. All of these things in the description that he has given are coming because man is going to his eternal home. Do you see it? We are headed toward eternity. And the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, the golden bowl is broken, the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the Spirit of God returns to God who gave it. Most memorably of all, the pictures of verse 6 capture the beauty and fragility of the human frame. A masterpiece as delicately wrought as any work of art, yet as breakable as a piece of earthenware, and as useless in the end as a broken wheel. First half of this verse seems to portray a golden lamp suspended by a silver chain. It will take only the snapping of a link to let it fall and be spoiled. And then if this scene's too finely drawn, a picture of our familiar selves, it is balanced by the scene at the deserted well, an eloquent of the transience of the simplest and most basic things we do. There will be a last time for every familiar journey and every routine job. But there is a reminder in verse 7 of a future for all of us in dust to dust. So wrote Derek Kidner. But we must remember that the outer person, the body, is not all there is. The New Testament in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 5 gives us a deeper perspective as we draw closer to eternity. Listen to what Paul wrote. First of all, listen to this first sentence carefully, because in what you have heard so far, it would be very easy to become depressed, discouraged. And Paul says, so we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. Ecclesiastes is not all there is. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison as we look to the things that are seen, not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. So while we walk between Eden and eternity, we keep our gaze fixed on the eternal things. For, he says, we know that if the tent of our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to be put on by our heavenly dwelling, if indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked. While we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened, right? The burdens of Ecclesiastes, burdened, but not that we should be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. And he who prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us his Spirit as a guarantee. For Christians, part of our biblical realism is hope, is an assurance. This failing, fading, faltering body is actually evidence of an inner, renewing, and growing new man. How is that so? Well, that's because the old creation that we are part of is decaying and falling away. But the new creation begun at the resurrection and extended through our regeneration is being renewed every day, day by day. So while we groan now in the ever-present struggles of this creation, even in the struggles of growing older, we may be moving in one sense toward death. But death is not a destination. Death is a door, and for believers, there are immeasurable glories waiting on the other side. Let's think about these things as we come to a conclusion. First, reflect for a moment on being young. There is a sense in which you may rejoice in this time of your life, as long as it is weighed and balanced with knowing where you're going and knowing the future accountability. But remember, youth is fleeting. You will not be eternally young. You will not be eternally strong. There's coming a day where weakness, faltering, and failing will come. And that should not cause depression. It just simply causes us to live wisely and well in the midst of this world. But then remember also that the Proverbs in particular points us to the flightiness of youth. The fact that while we are young, we tend not to want to be have pressed upon us the seriousness of the important things. And keep in mind that remembering the Creator calls you to remember the Creator's word and call to you. and think about growing old. I hope this is not new news to you, but growing old is certain. Growing old causes us to become frailer. And growing old often is attendant to many difficulties. I want to pause here. There's a whole industry out there that's working really, really hard to pretend that these things are not so. That if you just eat the right foods and take the right vitamins and exercise in the right way and do all of these things, that you can push these further and further away. And yes, at the human level, sure. But at the divine level, when God deems to step in and to cause these, it's not going to matter how fit you are. But remember that as we grow old, then we begin more and more to be able and available for ministry. We talk about retirement. We have this whole concept in our Western culture and society. Don't retire to nothing, retire to ministry if you're going to retire. Remember that you, as you have lived in grace and lived and walked with God, there should have been a growing wisdom to be shared and imparted to those who are younger. And finally, just a practical word to our church family on minding the older, being mindful of those who are older among us. First, exhorting children to remember that, as Ecclesiastes says, there is a tender balance. There is unsteadiness on their feet. That's why we ask our children not to run in our hallways, run in the classrooms, and even in here. There are many older people in our congregation who are easily tipped over by your youthful exuberance. Exhort children, as I am now. And encourage the older. You listen to a text like this and you look and you go, oh my, I just don't even think about this. Well, okay, but there are a lot of people who are living this. And being downcast, discouraged, depressed during that growing frailty and feebleness calls forth from all of us encouragement, contact, not allowing the older people to slowly sort of disappear, and engage them. If you're a young person, engage those who are older. They have learned much wisdom. They have much to teach, and you have much obligation to hear and to heed. We are living between Eden and eternity. And we are still living in, yes, the old creation. But for those who have been regenerated by the Spirit of God, the new creation has come. It has come into your soul. And all things are in the process of being made new until that day in which the silver cord will break. And you step through the door we call death, and you will be clothed with a building from heaven, a glorious new creation in its fullness, in its finality. For that day, we long. Let's pray. Father, grant through our hearing and heeding of these words from your word, and our seeing by faith, not only what is real in our world, but what is a glorious and unimaginable reality awaiting us. May our hearts be stirred up to faithfulness, to ministry, to love, and to doing good for the glory of your Son. Amen.
As we contemplate the frailty of our flesh, and as we remember our Creator through the strength of His Savior, let's